Stop believing the Hollywood lie that Xerxes was simply a gold-covered tyrant obsessed with crushing the Spartans. The truth is carved into a limestone tablet that was hidden under the dust of Iran for 24 centuries. You might think you know the villain of the Battle of Thermopylae, but what if I told you his most dangerous war wasn't against the Greeks, but against a legion of demons? You are about to discover the Daiva Inscription, a controversial ancient text that completely rewrites the history of the Persian Empire. It reveals a king who wasn't just a conqueror, but a religious revolutionary, fighting a supernatural battle for the soul of the world. But to understand why he declared war on these dark gods, we have to go back to the ruins of Persepolis in 1935. Imagine standing in the heat of the Iranian desert, surrounded by the crumbling columns of what was once the wealthiest city on earth. This is where archaeologists from the University of Chicago were excavating the harem of Xerxes, a massive residential quarter of the imperial palace. Buried beneath the rubble, they found 7 stone tablets. 3 were in Elamite, 3 in Babylonian, and 1 in Old Persian. The Old Persian tablet, known to historians today as XPh, seemed like a standard royal proclamation at first glance. It begins with the typical praise of Ahura Mazda, the supreme god of Zoroastrianism, and lists the titles of King Xerxes. But as the translators worked their way down the lines of cuneiform text, the tone shifted from regal pride to religious fury. The inscription lists the lands that Xerxes ruled, a massive empire stretching from India to Ethiopia. He names the Ionians, the Egyptians, the Babylonians. It is a roll call of the ancient world. But then, in the 4th paragraph, Xerxes stops listing his conquests and starts confessing a secret crisis that plagued his reign. He speaks of a specific country within these lands that was in turmoil. The text reads, "When I became king, there was among these countries one which was in rebellion. Afterward, Ahura Mazda bore me aid. By the favor of Ahura Mazda, I smote that country and put it down in its place." Now, putting down rebellions was standard business for a Persian king. His father, Darius, had done it constantly. But Xerxes wasn't just crushing a political uprising, he was crushing a spiritual one. The inscription continues with a line that has baffled and fascinated scholars for decades. "And among these countries, there was a place where previously false gods were worshipped. Afterward, by the favor of Ahura Mazda, I destroyed that sanctuary of the demons, and I made proclamation, 'The demons shall not be worshipped.'" The word he uses for demons is Daiva. This is where history gets incredibly complicated and fascinating. In the ancient Indo-Iranian languages, the word Daiva shares a root with the word for God in other cultures. In Sanskrit, Deva means God. In Latin, it becomes Deus. Even the Greek Zeus shares this linguistic DNA. But in the religious revolution of ancient Persia, the meaning was flipped upside down. The old gods of war and chaos were rebranded as demons. When Xerxes wrote that he destroyed the sanctuary of the Daiva, he was claiming to have physically destroyed a temple dedicated to the old, pre-Zoroastrian pantheon. He was enforcing a new world order where only Ahura Mazda and the concept of Arta, or truth, could reign supreme. This raises a massive question that historians are still arguing about today. Which country was he talking about? Xerxes doesn't name the rebellious land. He leaves it anonymous, perhaps to deny it the dignity of being remembered. For a long time, scholars looked at the map and pointed to Babylon. We know Babylon rebelled against Xerxes twice early in his reign. There were rumors, passed down by Greek historians like Herodotus, that Xerxes was so angry he melted down the solid gold statue of their god, Marduk. It fits the narrative perfectly. A rebellious city, a destroyed temple, a king asserting his dominance. But modern archaeology has made us question this story. Evidence suggests the Temple of Marduk was still functioning long after Xerxes left. So if it wasn't Babylon, was it Athens? Xerxes famously burned the Acropolis to the ground in 480 BC, destroying the temples of the Greek gods. To a Persian king, the Greek pantheon would certainly look like a chaotic collection of Daiva, but the inscription implies a province within his empire, not a foreign enemy he was currently at war with. But wait, because the most shocking theory is still to come. Just when you think this is a story about foreign conquest, the evidence suggests the enemy might have been much closer to home. Some historians now believe the Daiva worshippers weren't foreigners at all. They were Iranians. This theory suggests that Xerxes was fighting a civil war against his own people who refused to accept the new Zoroastrian religion. It paints a picture of Xerxes not as a foreign tyrant, but as a domestic inquisitor, purging the old pagan traditions from the Iranian heartland itself. This changes how we view the entire Achaemenid Empire. We usually think of the Persians as incredibly tolerant. Cyrus the Great is famous for allowing the Jews to return to Jerusalem and rebuild their temple. The Persian kings generally let people worship whoever they wanted, as long as they paid their taxes. But the Daiva inscription shows us the limit of that tolerance. Xerxes draws a hard line in the sand. He writes, "Where previously the demons were worshipped, there I worshipped Ahura Mazda and Arta reverently." This introduces the concept of Arta. In the Persian worldview, the universe was a battleground between Arta, truth and order, and Drauga, the lie and chaos. By worshipping the Daiva, these rebels weren't just practicing a different religion, they were serving the lie. They were agents of chaos, threatening the cosmic stability of the empire. To Xerxes, destroying their temple wasn't an act of oppression, it was an act of cosmic maintenance. He believed he was saving the world from spiritual pollution. But here is where you have to look closer at the text. Despite his harsh words, Xerxes admits that the problem persists. He says, "Where previously the demons were worshipped," implying that the worship was deep-rooted. You don't create a massive stone inscription to ban something that nobody is doing. The fact that he had to carve this law into the walls of his palace suggests that the worship of the Daiva was a widespread and dangerous threat to his authority. We also have to consider the political propaganda aspect. Xerxes had a tough act to follow. His father, Darius the Great, was a usurper who seized the throne and built the empire to its greatest height. Xerxes inherited this massive machine, and he had to prove he was strong enough to hold it together. It's easy to look at the Greek accounts of Xerxes whipping the sea or beheading his engineers and think he was simply a madman. But the Daiva inscription shows us a calculated ruler. He used religion as a tool of statecraft. By defining his enemies as demon worshippers, he delegitimized their political grievances. They weren't freedom fighters or tax protesters, they were servants of evil. It's the oldest trick in the political playbook. The inscription ends with a promise and a warning. Xerxes writes, "You who shall be hereafter, if you shall think, happy may I be when living, and when dead may I be blessed. Have respect for that law which Ahura Mazda has established." He is speaking directly to future generations. He is speaking to us. He ties happiness in this life and salvation in the next strictly to obedience. This is a theological ultimatum. It reveals that the Persian Empire, often viewed as a purely secular military machine, was actually underpinned by a fervent religious ideology. The Daiva inscription is one of the most important documents for understanding the history of religion. It captures that precise moment in human history when polytheism, the worship of many gods, began to clash with monotheistic ideas of absolute truth. Xerxes stands at the crossroads, pushing the world toward a dualistic view of good versus evil that would influence Judaism, Christianity, and Islam centuries later. When you look at the ruins of Persepolis today, the wooden roofs are gone, burnt by Alexander the Great in an act of revenge. The tapestries have turned to dust. The gold is long stolen. But these words, carved into the grey limestone, survived the fire. They survived the rise and fall of empires. They survived to tell us that the King of Kings was afraid of something. He wasn't afraid of the Spartans. He wasn't afraid of the Athenians. He was afraid of the chaos that the Daiva represented. He spent his reign trying to impose order on a chaotic world, using every weapon at his disposal, from his immortals to his stone carvers. So the next time you see Xerxes portrayed as a cartoon villain, remember the Daiva Inscription. Remember the man who believed he was the only thing standing between civilization and the forces of darkness. As we look back at this ancient attempt to enforce a single truth upon a diverse empire, it forces us to ask a difficult question about power and belief. Do you think Xerxes was genuinely a pious man trying to save his people's souls from what he considered evil? Or was he simply using the Daiva label as a convenient political weapon to crush dissent and centralize his power? Let me know your perspective in the comments below.